Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. And thank you, Frederick. Where are you? Oh, he left. Okay, for giving a short introduction to Trial Nation. Frederick is actually part of the board of on the board of Trial Nation, so he knows Trial Nation very well. And I will give you a bit more of a deep dive into Trial Nation and presenting to you how Trial Nation works as a part of the clinical research ecosystem in Denmark. And first I want to check, can everybody hear me well? Because I have no microphone. Okay, very well. So just to put a bit of context to this talk and to show you where I'm coming from. At Trial Nation, we have a vision, and our vision is that we pave the way to a future where patients enjoy stronger, sustainable health driven by fast access to cutting-edge medicine and medical technology, where healthcare professionals save more lives and promote stronger health by always having state-of-the-art medical research and the latest discoveries right at their hand. And we do strongly believe that through clinical research, we create better health and wealth for Denmark. And of course, biobanks are an integral part of clinical research, even though our scope is primarily clinical trials. So you've heard a lot about Denmark. Just to recap, in case anyone has forgotten, Denmark, about 5.8 million people, outstanding clinical competencies, extensive and saturated longitudinal health data, and data across all humanities as well. And we're in the very good position that already in 1968, we implemented the central person register, which is the unique 10-digit identifier. And that's, of course, something that we share, for instance, within the Nordics, similar structures. And this is used across society from cradle to grave. We have a number of health registries, and we have a national biobank with an increasing number of samples. The last count of when we made this slide, it was 22 million. I'm not sure what the number is today. If someone knows that, I would be happy to take.
The grand overview is 27 million.
27. Okay.
In the biobank registry.
Okay.
The physical biobank is 12 million.
Good. Thank you. So I will give you an overview of what we do, and I will give you an example of how we work in Trial Nation. And then I will give some ideas and show you some examples of how we work in partnerships. And I will be very happy to have a dialogue around that afterwards. So where we come from, we are a Danish publicly funded non-profit political initiative to pursue the benefits of clinical trials. And if you want to put it in very short, we connect stakeholder perspectives and connect business with clinics. That's sort of the very short version. And as you heard, we are primarily funded with the life science strategy and previously the previous life science strategy and the Innovation Fund Denmark, which is, again, as Frederick alluded to, a growth agenda. Looking at the board, we have a very good overview and connection of the ecosystem, not the universities. Note that the universities are not part of this. And the reason the universities are not part on the board is because the physicians and research personnel who participate in clinical trials, they do that with their regional hats on when they participate in the clinical trials. And that does not mean that universities are not important to us. It's just the construct of the board. So you have all Danish hospital owners, and that is regions. We have 5 regions in Denmark, all have a position on the board. They are all their own legal entity. And I'm sure that you've discussed yesterday what that implies when it comes to contracts. And I heard this already this morning. So you know all about that. We have an equal number of industry representatives, and these are life science companies, for instance, pharma companies, medtech companies, CROs who provide services to run clinical trials on behalf of medtech and pharma. We have the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Industry, Business and Financial Affairs. And what we also have is that we have Danish Patients, which is the umbrella organization for all the patient organizations in Denmark, and also the Danish medical societies on board as observers. So that means that we have a very nice construct with the ecosystem around a clinical trial on our board. So what we do is that we maintain and develop disease-specific networks across Denmark, and they have excellent track record in collaboration with the industry, meaning industry-sponsored clinical trials. This, of course, also means that these networks are equally important when it comes to running academic clinical trials. And just to give you an example, a very recent example is one of our networks, which I will come back to in a slide or two, is within infectious diseases and immunomodulation. And the fact that they have such a well-established good collaboration has meant that they are in the position to make a huge study to follow up on the vaccine implementation in Denmark. And that, from what they say themselves, if they hadn't collaborated on a national basis and had this sort of underlying structure, they would not have been in the position to pull this off. We address barriers. I heard the sigh when Frederick said, address barriers in clinical trials, and then I saw his body language like this. And we do know, for instance, GDPR, but the good thing is that in the current life science strategy, there is a very strong wish to really turn every stone to see what can be done to remove barriers such as GDPR. Within the constraints, of course, that you have an EU regulation that you need to comply with, but nevertheless, there is extremely strong political backing. And I can't stress this enough, how important that is and how strong that is in Denmark. And I can say this with pride because actually I'm Swedish. I have a Danish last name, but I can put it into the context, and Denmark is so strong on the public-private collaboration side. We also promote Danish clinical research capabilities, and we do this in different constructs. We work very closely with the foreign ministry on this, because it's all good that we sit here. Now we have an international audience, but very often we're focused in a Danish or Nordic construct. But if nobody outside knows what we can do, then we miss out on opportunities on collaboration. So that's also something that we do. And then we inform about the synergies of clinical trials, because if you don't start with the patient, that the patients have the trust and the willingness to participate in clinical trials and know what that is, and if you don't have the backing on why is it important to run clinical trials, you have a lot of headwind. But in Denmark, we are very, very lucky to have the trust from patients. And I think it's important, it's been mentioned earlier today, that to keep the trust in patients in participating in clinical trials, that's a continuous process. It's not something to take for granted. And we're in a very good position. A few years ago, together with Danish Patients, we made a survey, and 94% of patients would either be willing immediately to participate in a clinical trial, or would be positive but would like to consult more before taking a standpoint. And I think that's absolutely fantastic figures, which we should be really proud about. In our work, we have a lot of interactions with many different types of stakeholders. You saw the slide earlier on our board composition, and you can see that in our day-to-day interactions, we do have a lot of interactions with the whole ecosystem. And what we want to achieve is that we are sort of the neutral arena where we can facilitate the interactions, for instance, on addressing barriers, working on different projects together, etc., etc. Now I'll give you an overview of a Tri-Nations Center, what that is, and how we work. And we actually relay feasibilities, and the feasibility is when you have a clinical trial protocol, a first page outline to see, is this a protocol which would have a suitable patient population in your country? Is it something which fits with the medical practices? And do we have the equipment to do all the different investigations that needs to be done? Are there interested investigators who want to do this? And what would be the potential number of clinical trial participants in the trial? So we do that for all disease areas to all clinical trial units. So whatever clinical trial you have, you can come to us. You're very free to contact any researchers that you already have contact with. But if you don't know and you don't have the established network, you can come to us and we will facilitate this interaction. In addition to that, we also support clinical trials infrastructure in about 40 clinical trial units across Denmark. And this is actually, although of the 5 Danish regions, they supply money to Trial Nation. Trial Nation redistributes the money according to decisions by the board to facilitate the preparedness to take on board clinical trials. So again, that really shows the commitment, that it's not just a sort of mental commitment, but actually there are funds supplied to this initiative. And we are a single entry point to clinical trials in Denmark. Again, it's not that you have to come to Trial Nation, but it's to facilitate if you want to come to, if you don't know whom to contact. And we have all university hospitals have trial infrastructure in place with highly skilled, up-to-date GCP trained staff, with potential for detailed patient follow-up. We know in many countries, if you have a long-term study, you might be in the position that you actually lose the patient, so you don't have the patient outcome because someone moves and then you don't have a CPR number, so you don't know what's happening. But in Denmark, that's usually not at all a problem. And we've also been very early in having excellent capabilities of genomic profiling to allocate patients to trial. And then again, from a pharma company perspective, having a national setup so that you actually can go to one place, should you choose to, and get a national overview of the capabilities, it makes things a bit more smooth. I would also like to stress that the Lægemiddelstyrelsen and the Danish Regulatory Medicines Agency, they are extremely collaborative, looking at it from a sort of overview authority scale. They are very consultative, very easy to get in contact with. Now, speaking about the Trial Nation centers, we have currently centers within respiratory medicine. We have a network within pediatric medicine. We have a center in dermatology, hematology, infectious diseases, dementia. We also have a medical technology initiative, and we have an oncology center, which I will come back to. And for those, the funds that I talked about earlier with the region supplying funds and Trial Nation distributing these funds, that's where the money goes. And on the right-hand side, we have all other disease areas where we help facilitate contact, not on a national level, but in each region. And that covers all disease areas and all of the geographies in Denmark. So coming back to the Trial Nation of the Center of Oncology, and the reason I'm choosing to present this center is because within the oncology space, it was started very early with genomic sequencing, and it's something which is used also in clinical practice and in the academic research. It was established in 2014, and as Frederick told earlier, this was part of a growth initiative funded by Innovation Fund Denmark. Today, it consists of 9 oncology departments across Denmark, and in the period of 2015 to 2020, 228 trials were initiated within this network. And this is an example how an extremely well-functioning community works. So there is an extended use of genomic testing. They have a national tumor board, which is used in clinical practice as well for the complex cases to discuss how they should be treated. They collaborate on clinical trials and also in clinical practice to referral patients as relevant. And they are very strong on involving patients. And I'm saying this, it's not something that you do because you have to. It's really integral to have the patients on board. Now, one may think, actually, there are great possibilities for synergies. And one of the upcoming discussions that we see coming more and more, it's not part of the general regulatory work as such today, but the opportunity of augmenting traditional clinical trials data with supplementary data. For instance, genomics data, biobanks data, doing it with innovative ways. I've shown here one of the Innovation Fund Denmark projects. I think you heard about this yesterday, the Oscar project. No? Okay. The Oscar project is a project where you're looking at how can you involve data from clinical practice in an anonymous way and making it accessible and analyzable and overcoming sort of the current legal barriers. And they have their own website, so you can check that if you're interested. There is also an initiative to make it more easy to get a good overview of what data are there, how do I apply to get access, and not addressing the legal barriers, because that's being done on a separate basis, but at least knowing that, okay, if I want to apply to this data, I need to have this, and this in place. And if you have any projects related to that, I would like to say that currently they are doing a pilot, and this is actually also the name of the website address. So if you want to influence and if you want to check it out, now is the time. So partnerships, that actually enables us to innovate on clinical trials. And I will give you a few examples where partnerships play a very big role in innovating clinical trials. One area is decentralized clinical trials. And decentralized clinical trials, that means that the patient do part of the investigations or the whole investigation from a different location than the physical clinical trial clinic that participates in the clinical trial. And it could be anything from taking lab samples at a local lab rather than traveling 400 kilometers to your trial site, to doing the full consultation with digital interaction with your clinical trial site. So it could be anything in this range. And Innovation Fund Denmark, you can see a theme here, how supportive the Innovation Fund Denmark is on the commercialization and innovation of activities in Denmark. They support a collaboration between researchers, companies, and Trial on the development of a digital platform for clinical trials. And this particular project runs for 2 years, and it has 3 studies within the chronic disease space. And our role at Trial is to collaborate with stakeholders on framework conditions for decentralized clinical trials in Denmark, patients, life science companies, researchers, and authorities. And we actually have a concrete outcome from this project, where the Danish Medicines Agency have published a guidance on decentralized elements in clinical trials. And we're actually the first in the world to publish this guideline, and that's something we are very proud of. We saw that the Swiss Medic, they copied, well, they didn't copy, but they were inspired by this guideline and presented something similar. And as you may see, this is from September this year, and it's already version 2. So that shows that it's not a guidance which is issued, and then it's a, well, excellent, now we've done that. It's actually a continuous work, and I know that they are also in the position of making a new edition of this guideline. So it's a very ongoing, vibrant collaboration. Another example, which was also mentioned earlier, is that we are working on a national overview of clinical trials so that you as a patient or as a GP can find the right trial for you and know what are the possibilities and whom do I contact. Currently, if you want to, you can find out that there is a trial in Denmark, but it's close to impossible finding out of exactly which clinics and whom do I contact. That's addressed by this solution. And it's a way for us also to ensure a more equal access to clinical trials, or at least the visibility to take the informed decision if you're interested in seeing if it's a possibility for you. And it's something where we work together with all our stakeholder groups. So the ministries are on board, the public hospital owners are on board, the authorities are on board, and this particular solution, we work together with Danish Comprehensive Cancer Center, and we also have other patient representatives on board and clinicians, and it's a tool for patients and healthcare professionals alike. So this is when you actively want to investigate what are the possibilities for me. But what about the other case? Let's say that you are a researcher and you're looking for research participants. We also have a supplementary tool, which is a digital recruitment platform. So this is a complementary tool where there is a possibility to make your research more known and advertise for research participants. So there are huge gains from this, and it's also something which we can see will increase overall health, because we know that patients who participate in clinical trials actually have better health. The third example, and my last example, is a larger EU project within the IMI space. It's called the Health Outcomes Observatory, which is a project where Trial Nation is an associated partner and became an associated partner in 2019. So in Health Outcomes Observatory, the aims are to establish a culture of continuous outcome measurement across the healthcare ecosystem. So it's linking patient-reported outcomes in different forms to corresponding clinical outcomes. And this slide shows the construct. So on the left-hand side, you have the different kinds of stakeholder groups who participate: government, healthcare professionals, patient organizations, regulators, academia and research and life science industry. And you can see that this is very close to how Trial Nation is constructed. There is a pan-European HTO underway, and one might speculate where that might land. And on the right-hand side, you can see the data which goes into the project: electronic health records, patient-generated data, but also additional sources, of which biobanks could be one of those sources. So that's the reason I brought this example. And again, it's we are very honored to be in such a high-profile group. And again, this is, to our knowledge, the first associated partnership in Denmark. And for us, it's also something to see what can we create together more long-term. So now I've shown you what Trial Nation is and some examples of what we do and how we work with the public-private partnerships. And I would just like to close my speak with saying that mega trends, they need to be addressed by mega solutions, and partnerships is a very effective way of moving forward. So, thank you.